Thank you, Jenny Beth. And now I want to go to one of our Breitbart posse, an expert in all things Second Amendment and the Constitution from Texas A&M, Dr. AWR Hawkins.
Only one quick correction, Texas Tech, go Red Raiders. I know that burns you and A&M fans, but we're not here to talk football. We're not. Anyway, Joe, I'm AWR. I do write for Breitbart. A great relationship with Bannon. I've enjoyed that for years. He and I have worked together on guns for years, and I have a PhD in military history from Texas Tech, and that's the background I come from. Focus was Vietnam War, U.S. Navy since inception, Civil War, War of 1812. Coming into this, Joe called me and asked me, he said, will you explain what the Democrats are doing and what we can do? And as thin or narrow as that is, it's also fairly broad. Here's what I decided I'm going to do. Exactly what Joe asked. But in the beginning, I want to do a little education. So basically, I'm going to talk a little education, then a little application. Or if you want to think about it this way, a little philosophy, then a little practicality. All right? Now, when I think about this in an educational manner, I think about these words. Thomas Jefferson wrote them. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Let me make some points. A lot of people like to grab the idea that all men were created equal, and they seize on the word equal. You've already missed it if that's what you do. All men are created. It's very important. And when I think about men being created, I automatically think that that's indicative. That's an indicator. That tells me there must be a creator. And so guess what? As I keep reading, what does Jefferson say? Wow, they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Understand, this has been said many times, many ways already today. You can't hear it enough. Our rights, our unalienable rights, come from God, not government. That's Jefferson's point. Unalienable rights are also what are called natural rights because they come to us through the vehicle of natural law, or absolute rights. William Blackstone referred to them as absolute because he that gives them, God, is absolute. So all of those things are correct. You can say unalienable, you can say natural right, you can say absolute. It's all the same, all right? Jefferson listed unalienable rights that are archetypes of all unalienable rights, and those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These archetypes were fleshed out in the Bill of Rights, expressed in the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion, Amendment 1. The right to control your own things, Amendment 3. The right to be secure in your property, your houses, your persons, your papers, your effects, Amendment 4. The right to preserve unto ourselves as people every power not delegated to the federal government, Amendment 10. That's important, isn't it? Understand, the federal government is not born with rights. See, it wasn't born. The federal government, unlike us, was not created by God and endowed with yada, yada. No, the federal government is a construct created to keep a check on evil men, and the only power it has are the powers delegated to it, the powers that men willingly give it for a time. This is Jefferson's argument. This is Madison's argument. This is what we have to get back to. This is the 10th Amendment. And of course, mixed in with this then is that amendment that I'm talking about, the right to keep and bear arms, the Second Amendment. Each of these is inalienable, natural, absolute. Ours by birth because a Creator gave them to us, endowed us with them. But there is something particularly important about the Second Amendment. I've argued this for years. Bannon has argued it. in front of me, beside me, behind me, on the radio together. We have made this argument. The Second Amendment stands out somehow from among all the others. There is no logical argument against the Second Amendment. There's really not. And it's so crucial. I spoke last week with Representative Stephen Lapazzo, Mississippi 4th District, and he said, listen, if the Second Amendment falls, all our rights fall. That captures what I'm talking about, right? That's why that Second Amendment somehow stands out. It is somehow that amendment, rather than all the rest, it's that amendment of which Madison wrote, necessary to the security of a free state. Didn't write that about the Third or Fourth Amendment, both of those dealing with property. Didn't write that about the First Amendment, that dealing with the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. But when it came to an American's right to keep and bear arms for self-defense, which is the key component of Second Amendment, is self-defense, they said, look, this is necessary to the security of a free state. Now, because there are no logical measures, no logical arguments over which you can overturn the things I've said, not because of my intelligence, but because of the intelligence of Jefferson and Madison and the witness of natural law, because there are no logical arguments to overturn these things, what the Democrats do, we move now from philosophy to practicality, what the Democrats do is they try to use emotion, denial, and shame to get you to go against the Second Amendment and even, if possible, to erase it, all right? Emotion, denial, and shame, all right? Let's think about emotion. When Obama announced his executive gun controls on January 5th, you remember? He pulled to the side, he rubbed his eye so we could all see. He made a big spectacle of it, he really did, so we could all see. There was a tear coming down the side there. Now, we are expected, you know this, we are expected to be touched by that moment. We are expected to say, you know what? He's right. A few more background checks, a few more regulations on federal firearm license holders, a few more gun bans for Social Security beneficiaries. They aren't that bad. We've got to do something. That's an emotional ploy. That's what they want us to think. But the emotion, here's the danger of emotion. Not only is it not logical, but it draws you away from logic. See, if you get behind what they're doing and you look at it, you go, ho, 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 ho. This emotion is keeping us from realizing something very important, the dirty little secret, that nothing the president proposed in the name of stopping mass shootings, nothing, would even hinder a mass shooting, much less stop it. It simply takes away more freedom, all right? They bring out Gabby Giffords. Gabby Giffords is shot January 8th, 2011 by Jared Loeffner in Tucson, Arizona. She recovered. I'm glad she recovered. I don't wish her ill. I don't wish that on anybody. And I'm glad she recovered. But now they bring her out for the emotional pull. And she has undertaken a background check push from the moment that she recovered. And again, you're tempted to go, oh, look at Miss Giffords. It's not going to hurt to shut down the unexistent gun show loophole. It's not going to hurt to shut down the non-existent online loophole. We need to do that. We've got to do something. That's how that emotion plays on you. And then you get behind the scenes, and some of you already know this. You get behind the scenes. What's the dirty little secret? Her gunman passed a background check to get his gun. That's the dirty little secret. Jared Loeffner went through a background check to acquire his weapon. The emotional pull is strong. Bill Clinton, if anyone were going to use it, of course, it'd be Bill Clinton. In the 1990s, instead of talking about mandatory trigger locks, which sounds too much like gun control, Bill Clinton talked about child safety locks. Now, you notice the use of child there. When you hear that, instead of going, wow, he's pushing more gun control, enough Americans were tricked into going, you know what? This is a safety measure for the children. And they supported it. Any of you who supported it, you were bamboozled. You were made to look like a fool. It should bother you. Gun control is gun control, whether I put the name or the word child in it or not. Whether I use somebody who has a disability because of a shooting incident or not, gun control is gun control. We can't allow the emotional tactics to work. Then comes denial. Denial is the most sickening aspect of this. When Obama introduced his executive gun controls, Obama said point blank, the Second Amendment is not absolute. And he did that framing it with other amendments. The First Amendment's not absolute. The First Amendment, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You hear people of all levels of government say that. It's a Democrat argument, all right? But here's a problem. All unalienable rights, not just the Second Amendment, all of them are absolute. These rights weren't gathered together in the Bill of Rights so that the government could quickly find them when it wanted to regulate them, right? They were gathered together in the Bill of Rights as a way to say to the government, keep your hands off these rights. God gave us these rights, not government. And Obama treads on that, and he treads on you when he pushes that. Now, perhaps the left's biggest success, I'm going to throw this in, has been what they've done to our educational system. Words like natural law, William Blackstone, absolute rights, what it means to be endowed by our Creator, these phrases, these words, they're gone. So people grow up and they have no idea that God has two laws, His divine law, which you read in His Bible, and then natural law, which I see when I open my eyes and I walk outside and I see the order in nature. And the order in nature tells me there must be an orderer, and that orderer is God. It's the same process Thomas Jefferson used. See, but there's that subtle push against that when Obama says, look, that right is not absolute. Then there is an all-out push. This gentleman should be ashamed of this. He lacks the ability for shame, but he should be. Senator Chris Murphy, Connecticut, August 2013, I covered him saying this. This is a quote. I'm not adding anything. This is a quote. A sitting senator, Chris Murphy, Democrat, Connecticut. The Second Amendment is not an absolute right, not a God-given right. It has always had conditions on it like the First Amendment has. Now, what he's saying basically is Thomas Jefferson's wrong. Now, if you cornered him with that, he would never agree, but that is what he's doing. Thomas Jefferson's wrong. Declaration of Independence really declared nothing. That's what he's saying, all right? And he's doing this because, please hear this, if the Democrats can ever convince you that your rights are not rooted in God, then, this is my opinion here, I think it'll be 3 to 4 years that you might be able to enjoy carrying a gun for self-defense. After that, they will figure out a way to get a majority vote, and your gun rights are gone. As soon as government has the say, as soon as government can say, we gave you that right, as soon as that happens, it's over. We have to dig in with Jefferson, endowed by our, not president, not senator, not congressman, endowed by our Creator. And that's where a right comes from that is woven into my humanity to such a degree, Jefferson described it as unalienable. Last point, when emotion and denial fail, the Democrats turn to shame. A common Democrat speech is, and I don't know how many times you've heard this from how many different outlets. This is a generic speech, but if you turn on CNN when we're done, you'll probably hear it spoken almost word for word from somebody. They'll say, how many more have to die? 14 were killed in San Bernardino. When will Congress finally act to expand background checks to keep guns out of the hands of those who shouldn't have them? Shame, shame, shame. And what they want those congressmen who represent pro-gun districts to start to become ashamed that they are letting themselves be controlled by a document that was ratified in the 1780s instead of by what they see on the streets in Chicago. Although this congressman has nothing to do with Chicago. He might be a congressman in Mississippi somewhere. But that's what they're doing. The goal of this approach is to shame gun rights advocates and Second Amendment advocates into silence so the gun controllers can run through. Here's a problem. If you haven't noticed this, take it in. Think about it. Universal background checks, we got to have them, There's enough death, California has universal background checks. There is no, quote, unquote, gun show loophole in California. There is no, quote, unquote, online sales loophole in California. It doesn't exist. Why? They have universal background checks. They also have registration. They also have firearm confiscation laws. What else do they have? On December 2nd, they had 2 people with guns kill 14 people. They passed background checks for their handguns. They had a friend pass background checks for the rifles. The system doesn't work. It is a bald lie for anybody to look at you, whether they're looking through a camera or if it's a face-to-face meeting between a congressman and his constituents. When they tell you that background checks will keep you safe, they lie. Let me ask you a question. Where you're sitting, you don't need to say anything. Just think about it. Last 15 years, name one mass shooter or one high-profile shooter who didn't pass a background check. Now, I'm going to save you from sitting there for 3 or 4 hours thinking about it. And the point is this. Background checks offer no hindrance, much less do they prevent high-profile shootings. I can think of 3 people in the last 15 years. One of them is the one they use over and over to justify background checks, and that's Adam Lanza, Sandy Hook shooter. But gun control won't stop him. He didn't go through a background check. He stole his guns. The other is the Clackamas Town Mall shooter who they used in Oregon to pass universal background checks. We got to have background checks to stop at Clackamas Mall. We got to have them. He stole his guns. He'll never go through a background check. All right? You see the point? Emotionalism, denial, shame. And it all comes down to one word, control. They don't want to control the guns. They want to control you. And they want to control me. Now, if we ever give in to universal background checks, when people will point to world history, and I have a propensity to do that, you start talking about Nazi Germany, and people shut you off. No, there you go again, conspiracy theory. You talk about China, people shut you off. Oh, there you go again, conspiracy theory. It's not conspiracy theory, it's history. But let's not do that. Let's do something easier. Let's just go to California. Not 10 years ago. Let's go right now. I've already mentioned it. California passed universal background checks. What followed? Registration. What followed? Confiscation laws. Just this year, their newest confiscation law went into par. The gun violence restraining order, it allows them to come and take your guns without even letting you know. A judge can rule that your guns can be confiscated. It's not even demanded in the law that you have to be present when the judge makes that ruling. So now, let's not talk about Nazi, I agree. Let's not talk about China, I agree. Let's talk about California, because that's the blueprint for what they're pursuing right now at the federal level. So when they try to use emotion, denial, and shame to get you to jump on board the background checks, as of right now, we're all in this room together. We all know better, and we can't buy into the lie. When you think about the Second Amendment, let me close with this. As I said when I started, the Second Amendment has a particular place, a peculiar place. I want you to think with me about a wagon wheel. Think about a wagon wheel in a heavily loaded wagon, so it's bearing a lot of weight. Yeah, wagon wheel might have 8 or 9 spokes, and it has a hub in the middle. Now, I want you to think about those spokes. Imagine them. This spoke is freedom of speech. This spoke protects me and my property. This spoke protects me and my person's house and papers and effects. Oh, this spoke protects my freedom of religion. This spoke protects my freedom to assemble. Oh, here's my guarantee that whatever power is not given to the government by the Constitution is mine to retain. All of these spokes held in place by a hub. Now, I could knock a couple of those spokes out. That wheel will still work. I could leave all those spokes and I could knock that hub out, and what happens? That wheel collapses. You're not going anywhere. The hub is the Second Amendment. The hub is the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights. And I know you're going to take many wonderful things from this gathering because there are many wonderful speakers. But one thing I want you to take from this, if you can, is this. Our senators, our congressmen, they need to guard that hub, because they can talk nice all they want, but once they allow that hub to be destroyed, that wheel collapses. And it's not just the gun rights that go away, it's every right listed in the Bill of Rights that go away. Every right becomes a privilege that we exercise with government permission after that. That's not how free people live. Thank you.
Don't go away. There's much more to come from Myrtle Beach and the South Carolina Tea Party Coalition Convention on Ground Floor Video Live. Coming up, presidential candidate and former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee.
The American dream. It's synonymous with everything good and the right of every citizen. It's never easy. Success takes hard work, perseverance, stamina, and holding fast to core beliefs. But an out-of-control government has put the dream in jeopardy. 8 out of 10 Americans think it's harder to achieve the dream now than before, and will be even worse for the next generation.
Somebody else made that happen.
Fortunately, a powerful voice has arisen to put we the people back in charge, to revitalize